In my final revisit videos of the ESFJ and ESFP, I elaborated upon the function axes in a new way. I would like to flesh my ideas out a little more completely in this video, but I highly recommend both of those videos as containing preliminary and very possibly superior descriptions of the axes and resulting quadras. I don't know, we'll just have to see how this goes. The idea, in a nutshell, is that the NESI and FETI axes, so both of those axes, can be characterized as universalist or democratic, while the SENI and TEFI axes can be characterized as the opposite, contextual and monarchical. What I mean by this will be given presently. The contextual axes, SENI and TEFI, see and judge things from their own context, that is, from their own perspective in the moment. They do best when they are allowed to operate as though they were the center of the universe, with everything positioned relative to them and their subject, i.e. as a monarch. In this specific sense, they are more, quote, subject-oriented. The subject is the privileged party, and the object revolves around them. Don't take that idea too far, it's just one of those similarities that I noticed, that you could think of these two axes as overall being more subject-oriented. The universal axes see and judge things outside of any context, outside of any particular perspective or moment in time. They do best when they are allowed to think and deliberate as though they did not even exist in the universe and were looking down on everyone else as if from an Archimedean perch. That is, they do best when they are allowed to formulate principles that are universally applicable to everyone at all times, i.e., democracy. In this specific sense, they are more object-oriented. The object is the privileged party, and the subject is to fall in line with them. Once again, I'm still working out that connection, but the contextual axes, of course, think this is a vain endeavor. You can't really make a system of principles that applies to everyone at all times because everyone is different and everyone is always changing. Contextual types accuse the universal types of trying to force everyone else into their one-size-fits-all cookie cutter without even bothering to look at the individual people themselves and their individual circumstances. In fact, contextual types will often feel that the universal types are simply projecting what is right for them onto everybody else, and then acting as though it were the most reasonable, logical, impersonal thing in the world. The universal axes have grief too, however. To them, the contextual axes are insufferably self-centered to the point of blindness. Nothing they do is for any greater good. It is for themselves, or for some individual whom they have identified with themselves. They then trumpet these individual interests as though they were self-evidently more important than anybody else's. The fact that you saw something or are convinced of something is not a convincing argument for the rest of us. You have to take other perspectives and values into account if you are to operate ethically in this world. The contextual axes are dynamic. They tend to be goal-oriented or motion-oriented. They are adaptive and always changing because one's own position in the universe is always changing. So one has to learn how to adapt one's worldview to continually changing data. And one is always thinking in terms of how to optimize one's experience or activity in the world. Goals, achievement, and optimization are only possible if you are oriented from a particular perspective that is biased towards a particular goal. The universal axes are static. They are seeking a position of rest. That is, they are seeking a position outside of the changing universe so that they themselves are no longer swept up in it but can watch it objectively. They are always searching for objective, rational, unselfish footing. For them, the goal, insofar as one can say that they have a goal, is not optimization but abstraction. They seek the most abstract universal form of a rule. They wish to end all striving and achieve contentment. Given all these points, I make the conclusion that the universal axes are the seat of language and intelligibility, while the contextual axes are essentially non-linguistic. That is not to say anything about the quality of writing or speaking. All I mean is that insofar as language is a means of communication by reference to universally agreed grammar and symbol, a method of abstracting one's meaning into some other form so that others can now own it as well, this is naturally something more related to the universal axes, because they are all about dissolving themselves into the universe of others. The contextual axes, on the other hand, often struggle to communicate their insights in this way precisely because it requires dilution, compromise, and simplification. The more abstract and universal you make it, the less unique to you it becomes, and it thereby loses all of its original truth and charm. The alternative method, then, is to use language as a means of gesturing towards non-linguistic experiences, towards spurring the other person's memory or recreating the experience organically in their mind. The NTJs and SFPs express both contextual axes. In socionics, they are the gamma quadra. A philosophical archetype for them could be Nietzsche, insofar as he rejected any universal morality in favor of self-development and the personalization of one's values. I represent them, the gamma quadra, in that picture from the ESFJ, ESFP videos. I represented them with mountains because there is no society in the mountains. There's just you surviving. All perceptions and judgments there are made by you from scratch, and all your actions are ultimately directed towards the optimization of things within your own sphere of life, not someone else's. The NTPs and SFJs, on the other hand, express both universal axes. In socionics, they are the alpha quadra. A philosophical archetype for them is Kant, insofar as he proposed universal limits to reason and an associated moral imperative to act as though one's maxims were universally accepted. I represent the alpha quadra in the ESFJ, ESFP videos as a city or a society, because in society there are universal laws connecting everybody together in alleged fairness and justice, and to which everyone may equally appeal and understand. The disagreements and misunderstandings between these two quadras, the gamma and the alpha, are generally representative of those between their individual axes that make them up. The alpha types try to freeze everything, while the gamma types want to get it moving again. The alpha types want to know everything, meaning that it is abstracted into something certain and therefore something still. But the gamma types want to do things and affect their will, and therefore have no use for perfect abstractions hidden behind a museum glass. They want working tools and formulae. The alpha types see this as remarkably short-sighted and egocentric. The universe is bigger than you, they say. You seem to be confusing what you want to be true with what is true regardless of you. You're not objective. You're casting things just so you can get stuff done that you want to. To this, the gamma types reply, well, maybe so, but I don't think you're any more objective than me, and in any case, if knowledge isn't useful to me, if I can't cast it so that it does something for me, then what on earth is the point of knowing it? The alpha types ultimately want to vanish themselves, which is why I think so many of them actually find Zen and Buddhism so appealing and natural. Meanwhile, the gamma types want to make themselves more present and more actual, which is why Zen and Buddhism are generally rarer among them. The NFJs and STPs are a hybrid quadra, the beta quadra in socionics. Their perception is contextual, but their judgment is universal. Their perceptions are made strictly in a personal context, but their judgments pursue an impersonal, non-contextual nature. They see things from their unique perspective, but they can only voice conclusions once all possible perspectives have been considered, and the original insight is tailored accordingly. Their principal concerns are articulation and persuasion. So an archetype for them is Plato, who proposed a theory of education where logic, argument, and dialectic are used as tools to direct the student towards a translogical vision of the truth. The NFPs and STJs are the reverse. They're the delta quadra in socionics. Their perception is universal and their judgment is contextual. They always strive to see things from an impersonal, for lack of better words, social viewpoint, but they are not comfortable settling with a similarly impersonal conclusion. Rather, after scouting out all their possible routes, they then wish to choose the route which they believe is most suited to them in their personal context in the universe. A good informed citizen of the universe, you could say. So they keep tabs on where everything else is at, while never forgetting their own hopes and needs. An archetype for them could be Kierkegaard, who laid out all possible options for human life in his books, but then also prodded us to passionately choose a path of ourselves alone. They are, in a sense, rebelling against or escaping from or transgressing society's arbitrary demands and logic in order to make their own way elsewhere. The beta types are learning how to be more deferential and accommodating, while the delta types are learning how to be less so. And I think that's a good general characterization. This essential fact is one way of characterizing the multitude of misunderstandings between these two quadras. They are passing each other on the road to each other's past, and they can't fathom why anyone would want to go back to where they just escaped from. They are jaded against the other's naivete. The beta type's insights, their impressions of things, are by nature inconsiderate. Recognizing that their impressions, their immediate impressions are inconsiderate, they to varying degrees temper or abstract these insights into more considerate judgments which are what they actually voice. A disparity can often arise, therefore, between the beta type's personal judgments and their public pronouncements. They are built for persuading others to their point of view by couching what was originally very personal in very impersonal, relatable terms. To the delta types, this amounts to cold dishonesty, obviously. The beta type seems to be playing the salesman. You see others on your own terms, complain the delta types, but then you pretend that you're on their side just so you can persuade them. If you really cared about them, you would see them on their own terms first, forgetting about yourself, and only then, after a fair hearing, would you continue to be true to yourself and say what you think. But the beta types reply, no, you've got it backwards. I don't want to just buy into what others want me to think. I want to see things for myself on my own terms. But then, when it comes to how I actually act towards you, how I actually affect you, that is when I consider your terms. It shouldn't matter what I think of you or how I see you, as long as I treat you fairly and squarely. But you don't think for yourself, because you don't actually care about real life. You only care about doing whatever you want to, off and alone somewhere. Obviously, I was trying to be intentionally cutting in my remarks for all of these quadras, because I think this is really how people feel about it, and I'm trying to articulate some of those problems that we don't always have, but I think when we do have them, it's very important to be able to understand why we're having such frustration with a particular person, because they're of this different quadra. So I hope this was useful to you. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.